Welcome to this week's edition of the CX Files, which delves into one of the most established offshore delivery markets for customer experience management in the world. Over the past 2 decades, Egypt has emerged as one of the most sought-after CX delivery points anywhere in the world. I made my first visit as an analyst to see Cairo's burgeoning contact center space in late 2004 and was immediately struck by the quality of talent, infrastructure, and strategic direction amongst local providers. Fast forward to 2020, and notwithstanding some challenges related to political stability that marked the country for a few years, Egypt is home to some of the biggest names in customer experience management. Today we hear from one of Egypt's pioneers in CX outsourcing. Throughout his career, Ahmed Refky has been in leadership roles with some of the biggest names in BPO and is today CEO of Raya Contact Center, one of Egypt's fastest growing homegrown CX operators. Okay, Ahmed, it's great to talk to you, and thanks very much for participating on the CX Files podcast. You know, we have been business associates and friends since the early 2000s when I made my first trip to Egypt to visit the contact center industry. And obviously a lot's gone on over the course of the past 16, 17 years. You were involved in the contact center industry even before I made my first trip, with regards to not just delivering domestically, but also really the burgeoning offshore market for Egypt customer experience. I'd be curious if you could tell me a little bit what you see as the major differences between Egypt's customer experience value proposition today as it was compared to when you first started out in the industry in the early 2000s.
Well, thank you, Peter, for having me today. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I mean, we're old friends, as you said. I mean, we both actually participated in that. In the born up of that industry since the early 2000s. So it was a long journey, and things have changed a lot. It's much better right now, and I will tell you the major differences of Egypt's CX value proposition nowadays are 3 points actually that I want to talk about. 3 points. The main point, the number one, is the competitive landscape. Today there are more global players who set shops in Egypt. It was not the case before. The clients. Number two, the clients. The number of clients are much bigger now, and both the clientele, the local clientele base, and the global ones as well. I mean, the local market has really evolved into in awareness and the pursuit of a better level of customer experience. Moreover, the Egyptian outsourcing market now includes many global brands, as you know, of offshore clients, which was not the case before. Now, the third point I want to talk about, this breadth of offering. The breadth of offering has really and considerably broadened in Egypt, not as much as languages in languages offered, but rather than in the value-added services itself, like RPO, KPO, and tech support that you see more often now. Now, the evolution of multi-channel support as well, Egypt value proposition today had to be competitive and accommodate the demand and cater for omni-channel support and automation. So the 3 points that really differentiate the Egypt CX value proposition now is, as I said, a competitive landscape, client base, and the breadth of offering that's offered out of Egypt.
And I think that those are all very relevant points, Ahmed. And I think, you know, as I think about the competitive landscape in Egypt and how it's changed, I remember my first trip down, there were maybe 2 or 3 local players that were really looking to disrupt in CX delivery domestically as well as for nearshore and offshore clients. Now it's a who's who of the contact center space from around the world. And more organizations are looking to try and set up a footprint in Egypt as a means of servicing clients overseas, whether they're in Western Europe, whether they're in North America, even Australia and New Zealand. And that raises an interesting point. There seems to be a lot more interest amongst enterprises in some of the key demand markets for Egypt and Egyptian CX services. In fact, in the most recent releases of the Ryan Strategic Advisory Front Office BPO Omnibus Survey, Egypt has fared very well. In fact, in 2019, it was in the top 5. It made the top 10 in many different demand markets in the 2020 version. So what, in your view, as somebody who's been operating contact centers in Egypt for quite some time, what would you say the prime reasons would be that enterprises, CX enterprise decision makers in the major demand markets of Australia, Western Europe, and North America are looking to shift work into Egypt as an offshore alternative, perhaps, as opposed to putting more capacity in the Philippines, India, or South Africa?
That's a very good question. Thank you, Peter. I mean, the value is very obvious. on top of the abundance of high quality English language support, many other European languages as well, and European language capabilities are present in Egypt. Egypt is a nearshore location to Europe. Egypt there's a big cultural affinity when it comes to the US market, and the abundance of the workforce itself. I mean, not only from the very basic services they deliver, but also you can go up the chain to real value and high-end services as well. Now, that's from the workforce point of view. And when it comes to infrastructure, Egypt has the most resilient infrastructure in the region. And this has been proven, not only just talk, but has been proven through the pandemic, that Egypt survived really not only the amount of pressure that was exerted on the network, but also was a very smooth transition to work from home. And I will talk about it later. How did we switch for work from home, and how did we survive and delivered real high performance matrices during the pandemic. Now, something very important, for the longest period of time, we used to offer Egypt as an option for US companies with pan-European presence. Because, I mean, Egypt, as I said, nearshore destination with English language support and multiple also European language capability. We used to offer Egypt as a pan-European, I mean, to US companies with pan-European presence. However, recently, I witnessed few migrations of offshore US businesses from Philippines to Cairo, to Egypt. Mm-hmm. So I think the reasons are very obvious now.
Yeah, I would agree. Certainly, I think business continuity is a very big element, and the interest amongst North American organizations, which I think traditionally has been focused around perhaps India and the Philippines, Mexico and Central and South America and the Caribbean for nearshore. There's a lot more interest in seeking alternative locations, and you know, I would say that you're bang on. One of the things that strikes anybody when they make a trip to Egypt for the first time is the abundance of people with significant language skills, whether it's English, French, German, Spanish, Italian, Dutch. You certainly find a lot of that in Egypt. And these have been amongst some of the other comments you've made around infrastructure and the quality of the labor force, the abundance of business parks. These are all factors. But one of the things that I know was certainly an obstacle for Egypt was what took place in the 2011 period. And we do know that that was an impediment in terms of Egypt's growth expanding when it came to customer experience management. Can you talk a little bit about the evolution since 2011 and how the investment climate looks nowadays for potential BPOs who might want to come into Egypt, or for enterprises that want to work with a BPO that's based in Egypt? Will the political climate be an impediment? Has it calmed down? What's your sense in terms of the status of delivery from a seamless standpoint?
Well, when you look at this instability that happened in 2011, it did really and indeed slowed down the growth. I mean, this uncertainty that engulfed the years 2011 to 2014 has definitely slowed down any aggressive plans for growth in Egypt. Everybody was more like in a wait and see mode. Everybody was waiting to see what is going on and what will happen. So really, the whole growth plan for the Egyptian outsourcing market has been slowed down. Now, I believe seeing what's happening nowadays, and especially in the past year or so, I mean, I believe that we are really successfully caught up and on an expedited pace now. I mean, I'm seeing more and more players coming in. I'm seeing more and more clients are interested in the Egyptian outsourcing market and interested to outsource their business to Egypt. And we're seeing more and more clients. And again, it's not only US companies with pan-European presence, but also pure US companies that want to establish their presence here and US clients that want to outsource their business to Egypt.
Ahmed, how do you view the manner in which the government has responded to the industry through the years? Has the government been proactive in terms of encouraging the CX industry and all elements of its ecosystem, all the way from delivery through to the development of technology?
Now, the main component is, as I said, we have the abundant languages, abundant workforce. That's not only the basic services, but also can go up the value chain to really high-end services. But again, we want people ready to be plugged in and work immediately. And there are plenty of support programs from the government now for training and giving the first part, the soft skills part and the first part of the training to people to make them ready to just plug in and play in the environment immediately. So training programs are really abundant, and the government is supporting those programs. And again, you can find not only basic soft skills programs, but you can also go up to AI and KPO and high-end really services that can be delivered. So government is really participating and supporting the industry by creating more and more people ready to be plugged in the business.
Well, that's, I think, great news for the industry and for potential clients.
That's one of the main reasons when you reach saturation. I mean, we're far from saturation right now. I mean, but when you reach saturation and you want people ready and to minimize the time needed to start any program, that's when you need people just ready to be plugged into the floor.
I'm glad, Ahmed, that you brought up the issue about technology, because there's a real contrast today in the CX environment relative to what it looked like perhaps in the early 2000s. I can recall 15, 20 years ago, the whole objective of a CX provider, no matter where they were, was to find as many agents and put them into as many workstations as possible. Mm-hmm. Volume was key. But the dynamic has changed so much over the course of the past decade and a half. So as we consider the fact that CX is now more value driven, by incorporating technology and advanced processes, I would say, to not just service consumers, but also to really help empower agents to do their jobs better. How do you feel that Egyptian players in the CX ecosystem have adapted to these changes?
Yeah, the Egyptian CX outsourcing industry has been weaning away from low-end, transactional kind of work. I mean, it's very clear and very obvious, and it's one of the value propositions in Egypt and differentiators here, that we realized this in the past couple of years, and more than ever in the past couple of months, that since the pandemic hit, the digital transformation was imperative. I mean, we couldn't be competing with having a digital suite of services, and we have to switch, as you said, from giving basic services using human interactions by incorporating more technology and digital platforms into the CX journey. So, I mean, as I said, I mean, we are more into getting away from the basic transactional kind of work and incorporating more digital platforms. And we've added analytics, we've added automation, we've added alternatives to the low-end processes, if I may say that, and in addition to 360-degree support across multi-channels. So the whole idea is, it's all about, customer journey.
Yeah.
Egypt at the beginning, when we started back 20 years ago, almost, it was voice services, mm-hmm. Nothing but voice services, and at that point of time, voice was the dominating services. But when you see now, we're talking more about more touch points and more the journey of the client's journey throughout the whole experience, and Egypt is really well positioned to cover more touch points and more interactions with the client throughout the journey of the client.
And I think that's crucial when we consider the fact that it's very much a case of value add now. And mm-hmm. What, in my opinion, and the research I've done at Ryan Strategic Advisory, is that the locations that are going to be relevant are the ones that are going to be able to adapt towards that element of higher value delivery, of mm-hmm. being able to understand the touch point that each consumer is going to be looking for, regardless mm-hmm. of demand, market, or vertical. And that raises...
Yeah, the basic voice services will never die. I mean, it will always stay, but instead of, the basic transactional kind of work that the agents used to do, it's now replaced more by technology and, digital platforms. and the agent is moving towards giving high-end, like tech support and high-end services. And as I said earlier, I mean, Egypt has the talents and the disciplined workforce to really deliver that service in a very high quality. And it
So,
has been proven. I mean,
no, totally. I would
yeah,
agree. And
yeah.
when we consider the fact that we have been in some very disruptive times of late, I think 2020 will go down as perhaps one of the most peculiar years that anybody has experienced in their lifetime, if not the most peculiar. I'd be really interested if you could talk a little bit about how you feel that the Egyptian customer experience sector has been able to respond to the big shift towards work at home, given the fact that some of your sites are amongst the largest I've ever seen, with
Mhm.
literally thousands of people working in the sector in bricks and mortar facilities. How has the migration towards a virtual environment been handled in Egypt? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Now, you cannot ignore that home-based and home sites is definitely a way to go for some businesses. I mean, for some services, that's the way to go. You cannot have a site everywhere, but you can have a home site everywhere. You can have someone working in a place where you don't have a physical site. We have a good talent that is not really interested to commute or is not interested to relocate. You can still use them. So home-based and working from home agents is definitely a way to go. And for some services, as I said, I mean, now going back 15 years ago, we have done several pilots that failed because, I mean, the infrastructure was not able to support that services. I mean, the infrastructure was not as good to really support working from home agents. Now, even before the pandemic, we were setting up our proposition as Raya for working from home model, and that was a clear proposition for our clients. The pandemic hit. In a very short period of time, we were able to move 96% of our agents home. And up till today, we still have lots of clients and lots of programs are working from home completely. And work from home is now a proven model. And thanks again to the infrastructure, the resilient infrastructure that supported this change. Without that infrastructure, we could have failed because, I mean, at the end, it all depends upon the resilience of infrastructure at your home. And this is something that's available right now. And it was proven again that, as I said, the pandemic hit, we were 96% working from home. I mean, agents working from home. And the performance was almost, I would say, if we are at 95%, the performance was at 93% working from home, which was acceptable by our clients during that tough time. And as you see, I mean, during the pandemic, the whole networks was congested worldwide. I mean, everybody was working from home. Everything was, overloaded. And again, we succeeded to deliver a very high-end performance during the pandemic. So I think that proves that the transformation of virtual agents from working from site to working from home was a very smooth transition. And again, I mean, it's not only the infrastructure, but the workforce is really disciplined. I mean, because work from home is another discipline that people in Egypt are not used to.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a shift that was a very smooth transition. That because people, I mean, the workforce itself is, as I said, very disciplined, and it was a very smooth transition.
Great, cool. Well, thank you very much, Ahmed. It's been great catching up and finding out a little bit about what's happening from a CX standpoint in Egypt. And certainly, I think the resilience that you've talked about with regards to the labor force and the level of support you've been getting from the government and the infrastructure certainly bodes well for the country's future as a location to support consumers from all over the world.
Thanks for downloading the CX Files podcast. If you have a moment, please give us a star rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, because this really helps other people to find the podcast. If you have any suggestions for future guests, or ideas, people or topics, then please just find myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan on LinkedIn and send a suggestion.